podcast today. I'm here in studio with Dr. Andy Woods. Welcome,
Mondo. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for those listening, we're going to be talking about an interesting topic, and yeah, I'm sure you've seen this. I know you reported on it, Andy, in the sense of they're coming this fall, September 18th and 19th, that the UN is having this summit, which is a summit kind of re-engaging the nations, or they're trying to re-engage the nations going back to the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, where an article came out June 13th. So I'll just read this first paragraph to set the stage. The title is, this is from the UN.org, so this is straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. The title is, we need 7 years of accelerated transformative action to achieve the SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals. And it's dated June 13th, and it says, almost 8 years have passed since the international community agreed to take bold and transformative steps to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, a plan of action to secure the rights and well-being of everyone on a healthy, thriving planet. Today, at the halfway point to 2030, that promise is in peril, and a fundamental shift is needed in commitment, solidarity, financing, and action to put the world on a better path, and it is needed now. So for those that maybe they're hearing about this for the first time, what in the world are they talking about here?
Well, it's interesting because it shows you these one-worlders are at least thinking in 7-year increments, and we know from Daniel 9:27 that whether this is that, we don't know yet, but there is coming a 7-year treaty, in this case between the Antichrist and unbelieving Israel. So they're thinking in 7-year increments. It's just, in this case, it's a little different. They're it looks to me like they're making a pact with all of the nations to kind of bring in these, what are they called, SDGs, yes. Sustainable Development Goals. And so there's some interesting parallels with Bible prophecy.
See, I think that's what I see as one of the reasons I wanted to address this is you have this agreement from 2015. So even there, they weren't thinking in 7 years; they were thinking in 15-year increments. It just happens to be that with COVID happening over the past few years, they've seen some increases, some speed up, and they're realizing, man, we need to take advantage. You hear some of them. We need to take advantage of what we've had here as it relates to some of the fear mongering and the crises. It's always a crisis, right? So they are regrouping, and it just happens to be right now in 2023. But I think for those that are prophecy watchers, all of us are, that when we see the UN say anything with a 7-year time frame, it brings up the hairs on our head. I mean, doesn't it? Shouldn't it? I mean, why not?
Well, sure. I mean, Bible prophecy predicts a one-world government headed by an Antichrist. And apparently at some point he's going to enter into a peace treaty with the nation of Israel, guaranteeing her security. So today when we talk about globalists or one-worlders, that's what these SDGs are. They're wanting to bring all 17 of these things into existence through the solution, and I put that in quotes,
right,
through the solution of one world government. When the big guns talk about 7-year treaties, we say, well, that's a very interesting similarity with what I know is coming in Bible prophecy.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I would like to do is to compare what we're seeing with this article, again, June 13th, and their connection with what they're hoping to accomplish, and then try to take what they're saying here and then to see if what is happening there matches what we see in Daniel 9:27, and whether, I mean, this isn't an official, the Paris Climate Agreement, again, that started in 2015. So some of the goals that they have here, it says in their report, of the roughly 140 targets with data, only about 12% are on track to be achieved by 2030. Close to half, those showing progress, are moderately or severely off track, and some 30% have either seen no movement or regressed below the 2015 baseline. Giving up on the Sustainable Development Goals or extending the deadline, presumably past 2030, to meet them is not an option. The world has been rocked by a series of interlinked crises: the COVID-19 pandemic, conflict, the climate crisis, and a weak global economy. Recommitting to the 2030 agenda is the best roadmap out of these crises, but we are fast running out of time to correct course. So this it reminds me of Rahm Emanuel, you know, right? Never let a crisis go to waste.
Exactly.
They have these ideas. We don't know anybody's heart. I don't read hearts. I'm sure there might be some that mean well, but we do know that the world lies under the power of the wicked one.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me kind of your thoughts here, you know, in the sense of this re-engagement, you know, using recommitment.
Well, to be frank with you, if I was not a Bible student and a Bible prophecy advocate, and I didn't know anything about Bible prophecy, to me what they say makes sense. I mean, it does make sense that we should have, let's just leave the Bible out of it for a second. Just from a humanistic perspective, world government makes sense to the human mind because we have all of these potential nuclear weapons around the world. Why not just isolate them and put them in one person's hands, and we've saved our planet? The problem is the Bible tells us at the Tower of Babel, and it tells us concerning the prophecies about the Antichrist, the end of the age, that if you get world government and it falls into the wrong person's hands, as God said in the book of Genesis chapter 11, nothing will be impossible for them. And there he's talking about the potential for evil. So as a biblicist, when I see the powers that be grabbing the strings of global government, I'm saying that's not good, number one, because eventually this centralized power prophetically is going to fall into the wrong person's hands. And number two, this is certainly stage setting for the things that are on the horizon concerning Bible prophecy. I don't think prophecies are such that they're fulfilled in a vacuum. If you just go back to the first coming prophecies, the stage was all set for those first coming prophecies. And if the stage can be set for the first advent of Jesus, why can't I see it being set for the second advent of Jesus? And so when I see these interesting similarities, that's how I categorize it. I categorize it as stage setting, you know, ultimately concerning what's to come, because the stage has to be set well in advance, you know, for the fulfillment of God's prophetic word. That's what I think is happening in our world.
Yeah, I mean, I like to say that we don't go from living in Mayberry one day to the full Antichrist system the next. Right? I mean, it takes in many ways. If you put Mayberry back in the 50s, just, you know, whatever, it takes a couple generations of stage setting. And if you like what you just said is great. Going back to the first century, I think God began the stage setting of the Messianic era of the first, going with Alexander the Great, the Hellenization, right? I mean, we have Greek God established it 300 years so that when the gospel did go out, it'd be easy to go out. And even Rome coming in, and the census and everything. I mean, these are world powers, and God's like, yeah, I'm stage setting this because my son's coming.
Yeah, right down to the piercing, because Zechariah 12:10, Isaiah 53, verse 5, Psalm 22, verse 16, all say his hands and he'll be pierced. The psalmist is more clear that his hands and feet will be pierced. Well, the Jews didn't pierce people.
They didn't crucify people.
They executed them through stoning. So Rome, under Pompey, about 63 BC, coming into the land of Israel, taking away from the Jews the right to execute their own criminals and popularizing what the Assyrians had invented, the crucifixion. As all of that comes into place, that's the Lord moving his hand in preparation for the piercing of his son. So if something like that can happen for the first advent, clearly we're seeing this kind of thing preparatory for the second advent.
Especially because when we look, I tend to think, and oftentimes we see, there's a difference between, I think, a prophecy, which prophecy often is a snapshot. Boom, Revelation 13, there's a snapshot of this global government that has instituted a mark of the beast, and you're like, okay, and then it steps away. And you're like, well, how did it get there? Again, it just didn't happen overnight. So now you have generations, even going back to 1947 with, or the the establishment of the United Nations itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, moving from the League of Nations. I mean, even before Israel.
Yeah.
So you have that idea of needing or precipitating a world government.
Yeah.
Going way back.
And I think the mistake that a lot of our camp makes, that are very enthusiastic about prophecy, and we should be enthusiastic about Bible prophecy, but the mistake we make is we say this is that. In other words, we confuse stage setting with an actual fulfillment. And that's where we start saying things like, well, this coming UN conference is the peace treaty with Israel. We don't know that yet. And therefore the rapture has to happen at a particular point to precede these 7 years. Well, we don't know that yet either. I mean, we don't know how long the stage setting is going to happen, you know, before we move into specific fulfillment. So I think we're confusing a lot of times stage setting with fulfillment.
Especially again, the motive is, hey, I hear, I'm excited.
Sure.
I'm excited. So to see the stage setting is really exciting, but then, you know, some people they're very careful, which is very wise, to say, well, I'm not saying that the rapture is going to be between now and then, or that is, like you said, that is, but nevertheless, sometimes there's a high level of implying it.
Yes.
And which leads people to, let's talk about that for a moment. Some people are like, well, I never said it was the exact fulfillment, but there's a strong level of implication. And then, so people get excited, and maybe I think let's ask that question. I mean, you're a pastor, you know, I pastored a long time. We look out for the different levels of people in the church, different levels of maturity, spiritual understanding, all the different, and as a shepherd, you sometimes you have to bring it down to the least common denominator. But there's levels of maturity there. So if we say something that potentially could be careless, they're going to run with, well, so and so said or implied. And we might have a way out and say, oh, I didn't say that. You go, but they left with the flavor that, man, September 18th, that's the covenant. That is the covenant of Daniel 9:27. And then September 25th comes, and October 5th comes, and then it leaves them with what?
Well, if we're not distinguishing like we are here between fulfillment and stage setting, and we're giving people the impression that the prophecies have to be fulfilled at a specific time, and start attaching dates, or as you say, leaning towards certain dates, giving ourselves a little wiggle room. I love what you said. What are we doing for the immature believers in the church? I mean, we're really setting them up for disappointment and disillusionment. It's a lot like the pro-life movement, when a pro-lifer goes off the rails and shoots a doctor or an abortionist. What does that do to the pro-life movement? It sets it back, I would think, a couple of decades. That's what we do when we don't distinguish stage setting from actual fulfillment. We take our whole dispensational eschatological group, and we just lose credibility, not only in the eyes of Christendom, but in the eyes of the unbelieving world.
Yeah.